All right, many thanks for choosing Citi TV. This is the Premier League preview show here with me, Evan Sofochu Man. So the guys are here to Sue Graham, as usual, on the show, and also Elikem Avotri, joining me for the analysis as we look ahead to that penultimate weekend of the English Premier League, a weekend where the Manchester City fans could be singing Ole, Ole, Ole. But let's start the show from the nominees for the awards, and starting with the young player of the season. Quite a very interesting nominee so far, and we have some 8 players who are vying for that accolade. There's Arsenal's Bukayo Saka there, Martin Odegaard is also there as well, and then Gabriel Martinelli. When you go to Brighton, they have 2 players in that nominees. We have Alexis McAllister and then Moses Caicedo. Newcastle has 2 nominees as well, in Steve Botman and also Alexander Isak, and then the favourites, Erling Haaland of Manchester City. Guys, these are the 8 players nominated for the young player of the season. Voting is on till Monday, 22nd of May. Guys, let me pick your thought first, Susu. With these 8 players, who's your pick and why?
You see, I don't even like the nomination criteria for the award. I'll start there. I think it's a bit too high, because when I look at players like Haaland and McAllister and Isak, and even Botman, I think they're a bit older. I think they're a bit more established in their careers. They've been first-team players for a few years. So it's a bit much for them to be nominated. At least when I see Saka and Martinelli, even though they're a bit established, they are still only about 21, I believe. So I think 21 should be the limit. I think right now the limit is 23 and so below. It's 22 at the beginning of the season. So even if you turn 24 as the season progresses, you are still eligible. I think it's a bit too wide a net, which is why we have some players here who they've been in the league for a while. They don't feel fresh enough. But
you think 23 years is still not young enough?
I think clearly, because we are seeing some very established players, they need to tweak their criteria a bit. Because for me, seeing a player like Erling Haaland, I know Erling Haaland is young, but for a young player award, I think he's past the stage of having to, compete for a young player award. I think he's competing for the big boy award. So I think it's a bit much to have him there. But once he's there, it has to be him.
With these 8 players, who's your pick and why? Tell me.
Like I said, because of the criteria, I would go for someone a bit younger. So looking at the players, it would be one of the Arsenal 3. I think they're a bit younger. So I would say Bukayo Saka.
Why Bukayo Saka?
I think, like I said, I would prefer to go for someone who's 21 and
just
younger.
Because of his age?
Well, I'm saying there's that, but he's the best performing when I use that criteria. So that's why he's my pick.
Bukayo Saka for you. Yeah. Eli, let me pick your thoughts also. He says he will limit it to 21 years and pick Bukayo Saka of Arsenal as his young player of the season. You side with this?
I share his sentiments when he says the criteria should be changed. And for me, I'll even go a step further and say it should be made for only teenagers. Because
that's 19 and below.
Yeah, but the problem with that is that how many teenagers are able to have a breakthrough season and play consistent minutes in the league? So that I can understand them a bit, but when you make the criteria this wide, we get things like that. Because ideally, when you talk of young players who have been performing this season, Bukayo Saka's name comes up, but Bukayo Saka and Erling Haaland can't be in the same category, and I will go for any other person than Erling Haaland. The guy has scored 36 goals in the Premier League season. Even old players have not been able to manage more than 32. So there's no way I can look at this list, see Erling Haaland there, and look past him, and not give and not say it
must be Haaland for you.
It must be Haaland.
Yeah, I'm saying based on the players nominated, it's Haaland. But I'm saying that based on my criteria, I'm giving my own award.
So if you were to vote, you go for Saka all day.
No, I have to vote for Haaland.
You vote for Haaland too?
Based on the players here. But I'm making a different point. Like the criteria is off. You see, I'm making a different point. Based on
what they have now.
Yeah,
you have
so do you know Haaland is 22, Saka is 21. So if you are saying Saka is young, then I can also make a case for Haaland to be young.
But my cutoff is 21. That's the cutoff I'm choosing.
Yeah. Well, that's why this criteria needs to be redefined, because
and I think you can even go a step further and say that if the players made maybe 30 starts previously, they are no longer a young player in the sense that they have that experience. It should be a player who is now it should be more of a breakthrough award rather than the best performing. I feel like it should be more of a breakthrough. Maybe the players in their Premier League career, they have less than 30 starts under 21. Like they should be the criteria should be a bit more stiff. Because I feel like some of these players, even Saka, he's a bit too established
This
for
is
me.
third season as a starter.
Yeah,
So it's more like a breakthrough player,
I
somebody
think
who's
so.
not really
I think so.
known,
Because
coming
if you
to
say-
have
yeah,
a good season.
Because if you just say young player of the year, then you throw in Haaland in there. He's going to be young player of the year,
Yeah.
top scorer, player of the year. You know, I get it. Not saying he doesn't deserve it, but part of the awards too is to recognize different things. That's why they've added young player of the year, to give young players a chance to win the award.
But his age suits the criteria.
And that's my point, that the young player of the year, if you want to open up the criteria, and it's like this, because it just makes it like, I don't know how to think. Now, it's not even rewarding a young player in a situation like this. And we've seen it a few times where Gareth Bale won young player of the year.
One player.
And player of the year. In fact, if I remember correctly, the year he won player of the year, PFA player of the year twice. But only this, was it the second time that he won PFA Young Player of the Year? Something strange like that. He won it rather when he was a bit older, which is why the PFA have changed their criteria. Yeah. Because I think Ronaldo too won Player of the Year and Young Player of the Year in the same season. So we see it happen. But then again, we can also argue that those players are generational talents.
Yeah, once in a
yeah, they are once in a generation players. But I think if the criteria was a bit, if the age was brought down a bit, I think it'd be preferable.
The effect of what Susu was, the consensus Susu has raised this. We have situations where the awards are confusing. For example, in 2015, Eden Hazard and Harry Kane were both nominated for Young Player of the Year and Player of the Year. Harry Kane won Young Player of the Year. Hazard won Player of the Year. Yeah. And it didn't make sense to me, because if Hazard is good enough to be Player of the Year, why is he not good enough to be Young Player of the Year? Because he fits into the age.
So will you be surprised if Haaland doesnon win the Young Player but wins?
Based on what they've been doing now, it might happen. Based on what
I think the Premier League one is a fan-voted one.
Okay.
The PFA one
is exactly
is players.
Yes.
So the players might think, okay, Haaland is I think the PFA one, they've already said is 21 and under or something like that. But this one being fan-voted, I don't see a situation where anyone opens their app, sees Erling Haaland nominated for an award, and doesn't pick him. And I think the fan vote is a certain percentage. There's the manager percentage, there's the player percentage. But I think because Haaland is going to do so well in the fan percentage, it will be very difficult for him not to win the award.
So for unanimously, Haaland wins this one?
I think so. I think because of how much he'll carry the fan vote. But if it decides that the managers and players decide that this Haaland guy, we're not going to even consider him in the young player category. Let's look at other young players. Maybe someone else could win, but I don't see that happening.
So Erling Haaland is the pick for both Susu here and Ellie. He believes that Erling Haaland has done enough to win the young player. But Susu was talking about a little change in the criteria later.